Sarah Martinez stepped off the transport bus at Naval Base San Diego, her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, and her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. At 22 years old, she was about to begin her journey as a rookie in the United States Navy. The California sun beat down mercilessly as she made her way toward the registration building, following a stream of other new recruits who looked just as uncertain as she felt. The base was enormous, stretching as far as the eye could see with gray ships dotting the harbor like sleeping giants. Sarah had dreamed of this moment since she was 14, when she first saw a Navy recruitment video at her high school career fair. Growing up in a small town in Texas, the daughter of a mechanic and a school teacher, the military seemed like her ticket to adventure and purpose. As she entered the processing center, Sarah noticed the stairs. At 5 feet 4 inches tall with a slight build, she didn't exactly fit the typical image of a sailor. Her long black hair was pulled back in a regulation ponytail, and her brown eyes darted around nervously as she took in her surroundings. Most of the other recruits were men, and many of them towered over her. Well, what do we have here? A voice behind her caused Sarah to turn around. A tall, broad-shouldered recruit with cropped blonde hair was looking her up and down with an amused expression. "Did you get lost, sweetheart? The Girl Scouts meeting is probably down the street." A few other recruits snickered at the comment. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she kept her mouth shut. She had expected this kind of treatment. Her older brother Miguel, who had served in the Marines, had warned her that she would have to prove herself twice as hard as everyone else. "I'm Jake Morrison," the blonde recruit continued, extending his hand with mock politeness. "And you are?" "Sarah Martinez," she replied, shaking his hand firmly. She noticed him wince slightly at her grip strength, something she had developed from years of helping her father in his auto shop. "Martinez, huh? Let me guess, you're here because your boyfriend enlisted, and you couldn't bear to be apart?" Jake's friends laughed again, and Sarah felt her temper rising. "Actually, I'm here because I want to serve my country," Sarah replied evenly. "Same as you, I assume." Jake raised his eyebrows in mock surprise. "Oh, we have a feisty one here, boys. This should be entertaining." Before Sarah could respond, a loud voice boomed across the room. "Attention! All recruits form lines for processing." The next several hours were a blur of paperwork, medical examinations, and uniform fittings. Sarah moved through each station methodically, trying to ignore the whispered comments and snickers that seemed to follow her everywhere. During the medical examination, she had to roll up her sleeves, and that's when some of the other recruits noticed the tattoo on her right forearm. It was a striking image of a coiled viper, its mouth open in a striking position, rendered in black and gray ink with incredible detail. The snake's eyes seemed almost alive, and there was something about the design that made people look twice. Most of the recruits assumed it was just a decorative tattoo, something she had gotten to look tough. "Nice ink, Martinez," Jake commented during lunch in the mess hall. "Trying to compensate for something?" Sarah ignored him and focused on her meal. The food was typical military fare, nothing like her mother's home cooking, but she ate every bite. She knew she would need her strength for what lay ahead. That afternoon, they began their first round of physical assessments. Sarah had been preparing for months, running 5 miles every morning and doing strength training in her local gym. She was in better shape than she had ever been in her life, but she was still nervous about how she would compare to the others. The first test was push-ups. One by one, the recruits took their positions and performed as many as they could. The men averaged between 30 and 50 push-ups, with Jake leading the pack at 62. When Sarah's turn came, she could hear the whispers starting again. $20 says she doesn't make it to 10, someone muttered. Sarah dropped into position and began. 1, 2, 3. She kept her form perfect, her back straight, her movements controlled. 10, 15, 20. The whispers stopped. 30, 40, 50. Now there was complete silence. At 73 push-ups, Sarah finally reached muscle failure and collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily but smiling. The drill instructor, Petty Officer Rodriguez, made a note on his clipboard. "Outstanding, Martinez." Next, Jake's face had turned red, and he wasn't smiling anymore. During the run that followed, Sarah kept pace with the fastest group, finishing in the top 10%. Her years of running in the Texas heat had prepared her well for the California sun. That evening in the barracks, as the recruits settled in for their first night, Sarah overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "Did you see the way Rodriguez was looking at her?" Jake was saying to his bunkmate, Tommy. "It's obvious she's getting special treatment. Probably sleeping her way to the top already." "I don't know, man," Tommy replied uncertainly. "She seemed pretty legit during the physical tests." "Come on," Jake scoffed. "A little girl like that? No way she's that strong naturally. She's probably on something, or the whole thing was rigged. Mark my words, she'll wash out within the first week." Sarah pretended to be asleep, but her fists were clenched under her blanket. She had worked too hard to get here to let ignorant comments derail her dreams. She thought about her family back home, especially her grandmother who had crossed the border from Mexico with nothing but hope and determination. Her abuela had always told her that the strongest steel is forged in the hottest fire. The next morning brought more challenges. During combat training, Sarah was paired with recruits much larger than herself. Jake made sure to volunteer as her sparring partner during hand-to-hand combat instruction. "This should be fun," he whispered as they faced off on the mat. "Try not to get hurt, princess." What happened next surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. As Jake lunged forward, something instinctive took over. Her body moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural. She sidestepped his attack, grabbed his wrist, and used his own momentum to send him crashing to the mat. It happened so fast that most people didn't even see how she had done it. Jake lay on the ground, winded and confused. What the hell was that? Sarah offered him a hand up, genuinely surprised by her own actions. I'm not sure. Lucky, I guess." The instructor had been watching. "Martinez, where did you learn that move?" "I didn't learn it anywhere, sir. It just happened." "Interesting. We'll need to explore that further." Over the next few days, similar incidents occurred. During weapons training, Sarah's aim was unnaturally accurate. She could field strip and reassemble an M4 rifle faster than recruits who had been handling guns their whole lives. In tactical exercises, she seemed to have an almost supernatural awareness of her surroundings, always knowing when someone was trying to flank her or set up an ambush. The other recruits began to notice. Some were impressed, but others, led by Jake, became increasingly resentful. "It's not natural," Jake complained to anyone who would listen. "Nobody's that good without training. She's hiding something." He wasn't wrong. Sarah was hiding something, but not what he thought. The truth was, she didn't understand her own abilities any more than he did. The tattoo on her arm seemed to tingle sometimes during combat exercises, almost as if it were alive. She had gotten the tattoo 2 years earlier, but the circumstances surrounding it were fuzzy in her memory. She remembered going to a tattoo parlor in Austin, but she couldn't recall choosing the design or even why she had wanted a tattoo in the first place. What she did remember clearly was the dream. It was the same dream she had been having for years, long before she had even considered joining the military. In the dream, she was standing on the deck of a ship in the middle of a storm. Enemy aircraft were approaching, and she was operating some kind of advanced weapon system. She could feel the power flowing through her, the perfect coordination between her mind and the machine. And always, in the dream, there was a voice calling her by a name that wasn't her own. Viper Ghost. Sarah had never told anyone about the dreams, not even her family. They seemed too strange, too unlikely. But lately, especially since arriving at the base, they had been getting more vivid and frequent. During her 3rd week of basic training, the challenges intensified. The drill instructors seemed determined to push every recruit to their breaking point. Sleep deprivation, grueling physical challenges, and constant psychological pressure were the norm. Many recruits began to crack under the strain. Jake was one of them. Despite his initial confidence, he struggled with the academic portions of training. Navigation, electronics, and military protocol didn't come as naturally to him as they did to Sarah. His frustration grew with each passing day, and he began to take it out on her more aggressively. "Teacher's pet," he would mutter when she answered questions correctly in class. "Show off," when she excelled in physical challenges. The comments escalated to more personal attacks, questioning her background, her family, and her right to be there. Sarah tried to ignore it, but the constant harassment was wearing on her. She began to doubt herself, wondering if Jake was right. Maybe she didn't belong here. Maybe she was in over her head. The breaking point came during a night navigation exercise. The recruits were divided into teams and tasked with finding their way through a series of checkpoints using only a compass and map. Sarah's team included Jake, Tommy, and two other recruits, Marcus and Lisa. From the start, Jake tried to take control of the team, despite the fact that Sarah had scored highest on the navigation tests. He led them in the wrong direction twice, costing valuable time. When Sarah tried to offer corrections, he shut her down. "Nobody asked you, Martinez. Just because you memorize the answers doesn't mean you know what you're doing in the real world." By the time they reached the final checkpoint, they were nearly 2 hours behind schedule. The other teams had long since finished, and the drill instructors were waiting with barely concealed impatience. "What took you so long?" Petty Officer Rodriguez demanded. Jake stepped forward before Sarah could speak. "Martinez kept second-guessing our navigation, sir. She doesn't trust the team leadership and insisted on taking detours." Sarah's mouth fell open in shock. Not only was it a complete lie, but Jake was actively trying to sabotage her training record. She started to protest, but Rodriguez held up a hand. "I don't want to hear excuses from anyone. The whole team will report for extra duty at 0500 hours tomorrow." Dismissed. As they walked back to the barracks, Sarah's teammates shot her angry looks. Jake had successfully painted her as the problem, and now they were all being punished because of her supposed incompetence. That night, Sarah lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, feeling more isolated and frustrated than ever. She had worked so hard, sacrificed so much, and for what? To be sabotaged by a jealous teammate who couldn't stand the idea of being outperformed by a woman? She thought about calling her family, maybe even requesting a transfer to a different training unit. But as she rolled over and caught sight of her reflection in the window, her eyes fell on her tattoo. The Viper seemed to be looking back at her, its coiled form almost moving in the dim light. Suddenly, Sarah felt a surge of determination. She hadn't come this far to give up now. Jake Morrison and his petty jealousy weren't going to derail her dreams. If he wanted to play games, she would show him what real strength looked like. The next morning at extra duty, Sarah worked harder than ever. She completed every task with precision and enthusiasm, never complaining or showing signs of fatigue. Her positive attitude began to win over some of her teammates, who started to question Jake's version of events from the night before. During breakfast, Lisa approached Sarah hesitantly. "Hey, about last night. I was thinking about what happened, and Jake's story doesn't really add up. You were right about the navigation, weren't you?" Sarah nodded, but didn't say anything negative about Jake. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is that we learn from them and work together as a team." Lisa smiled. "You're pretty cool, Martinez. I'm sorry I doubted you." Word began to spread among the recruits. Sarah's consistent performance and positive attitude stood in stark contrast to Jake's increasingly erratic behavior and constant complaints. Slowly but surely, she was earning the respect of her peers. But Jake wasn't finished. If anything, his tactics became more desperate and underhanded. He started spreading rumors about Sarah's background, suggesting that she had gotten into the Navy through some kind of affirmative action program rather than merit. He questioned her loyalty, suggesting that her Hispanic heritage made her somehow less American than the rest of them. The rumors were particularly hurtful because they struck at the heart of Sarah's identity. Her family had been in Texas for generations, and her grandfather had served in World War II. But in the closed environment of basic training, whispers and innuendo could be as damaging as facts. Sarah's performance never wavered, but inside she was struggling. The constant stress of proving herself while dealing with Jake's harassment was taking its toll. She began to have trouble sleeping, and her dreams became more intense and frequent. In one particularly vivid dream, she was aboard a massive aircraft carrier engaged in a fierce battle. Enemy submarines were attacking from below, while fighter jets screamed overhead. Sarah found herself at the controls of an advanced weapon system, her hands moving with impossible speed and precision. The tattoo on her arm was glowing, and she could feel an incredible power flowing through her. "Viper Ghost, this is command." A voice crackled through her headset. "We need you to take out those submarines before they reach the carrier." Without hesitation, Sarah's hands flew across the controls. Torpedoes launched from her position with deadly accuracy, finding their targets with ease. The enemy submarines disappeared in explosions of fire and water. Outstanding work, Viper Ghost. Mission accomplished. Sarah woke up with a start, her heart pounding and her arm tingling where the tattoo was located. The dream had felt so real, so vivid, that she could still smell the salt spray and hear the roar of jet engines. She looked around the darkened barracks, making sure she hadn't cried out in her sleep. The last thing she needed was to give Jake more ammunition against her. But, as she settled back into her pillow, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the dreams were more than just random nighttime fantasies. The final weeks of basic training approached with increasing intensity. The recruits who had made it this far were the cream of the crop, but only the best of the best would graduate with honors and receive their preferred duty assignments. Sarah continued to excel in every area, but the constant pressure and harassment were beginning to show. During a particularly challenging obstacle course exercise, she stumbled and fell, skinning her knee badly. As the medic cleaned the wound, Jake happened to walk by. "Looks like the golden girl isn't so perfect after all," he commented loud enough for others to hear. "Maybe she's finally showing her true colors." Sarah gritted her teeth and said nothing, but inside she was seething. She was tired of being the bigger person, tired of turning the other cheek. For the first time since arriving at the base, she seriously considered confronting Jake directly, regardless of the consequences. That evening, as she sat in the mess hall picking at her dinner, Sarah noticed a commotion near the entrance. A group of officers had entered, and the entire hall fell silent. Leading the group was a tall, distinguished-looking man with silver hair and more ribbons on his uniform than Sarah had ever seen in one place. "That's Admiral Harrison," someone whispered. "What's he doing here?" Admiral William Harrison was a legend in the Navy. He had served with distinction in multiple conflicts and was known throughout the fleet as a brilliant tactician and leader. He rarely visited basic training facilities, preferring to spend his time on operational matters. As the Admiral and his entourage moved through the mess hall, Sarah tried to remain inconspicuous. She had no desire to draw attention to herself, especially with Jake sitting just a few tables away, probably hoping for any excuse to cause more trouble. But, as fate would have it, Admiral Harrison's path took him directly past Sarah's table. She stood at attention along with everyone else as he approached, her eyes fixed straight ahead. The Admiral paused, and Sarah could feel his gaze upon her. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Then, to her complete shock, she heard him speak. "Excuse me, recruit. May I see your arm?" Sarah's blood turned to ice. There was only one reason the Admiral would want to see her arm, and that was the tattoo. Somehow, impossibly, he had noticed it from across the room. With trembling hands, Sarah rolled up her sleeve, exposing the Viper tattoo. The mess hall had gone completely silent, with hundreds of pairs of eyes watching the exchange. Admiral Harrison studied the tattoo for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, he looked up at Sarah with eyes that seemed to see right through her. "What's your name, recruit?" "Sarah Martinez, sir," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The Admiral nodded slowly. "Come with me, Ms. Martinez. We need to talk." Sarah followed Admiral Harrison out of the mess hall, her mind racing with 1,000 questions and fears. The eyes of every recruit in the facility seemed to burn into her back as she walked past their tables. Jake's expression was a mixture of confusion and barely contained glee, probably assuming she was about to be kicked out of the Navy for some violation he couldn't even imagine. The Admiral led her through corridors she had never seen before, past security checkpoints that required special clearance. His entourage of officers followed at a respectful distance, their faces serious and professional. Sarah tried to read their expressions for any hint of what was happening, but they revealed nothing. They entered a secure briefing room deep within the administrative complex. The room was spartanly furnished with a simple conference table, several chairs, and walls lined with maps and classified documents. Admiral Harrison dismissed his staff with a wave of his hand, leaving him alone with Sarah. "Please, sit down," he said, his voice gentler than she had expected. "And you can relax, Ms. Martinez. You're not in trouble." Sarah perched on the edge of a chair, still at attention despite his words. Years of military protocol training had made sitting casually in front of a superior officer nearly impossible. Admiral Harrison poured 2 cups of coffee from a machine in the corner and set one in front of her. I imagine you're wondering why I asked to see your tattoo. Yes, sir, Sarah replied, her voice still tight with nervousness. The Admiral sat across from her and studied her face carefully. Tell me, Ms. Martinez, do you remember where you got that tattoo? Sarah frowned, trying to recall the details that had always seemed frustratingly vague. I got it in Austin, sir. About 2 years ago. There was a shop on South Congress Street, but I'm having trouble remembering the exact name or even why I chose that particular design. Admiral Harrison nodded as if this wasn't surprising. And have you been having any unusual dreams lately? Dreams involving naval operations, perhaps? Advanced weapon systems? Sarah's coffee cup nearly slipped from her fingers. How could he possibly know about the dreams? She had never told anyone about them, not even her closest friends or family. Ah, yes, sir. How did you know? The Admiral leaned back in his chair and sighed deeply. Ms. Martinez, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels of government. Before we continue, I need you to understand that everything discussed in this room is to remain between us. Can you give me your word on that? Of course, sir, Sarah replied without hesitation. Good. Admiral Harrison stood and walked to a wall safe hidden behind one of the maps. He entered a complex code and withdrew a thick manila folder. The tattoo on your arm isn't just a decorative design, Ms. Martinez. It's a marker, a sign that identifies you as part of a very special and very classified program. He opened the folder and spread several photographs across the table. Sarah gasped as she recognized herself in the images, but they showed her in situations she had never experienced. In one photo, she was standing in front of an advanced submarine, wearing a naval uniform she had never seen before. In another, she was operating what appeared to be a highly sophisticated weapons control system. These photographs were taken approximately 3 years ago, Admiral Harrison continued, at a classified facility in Nevada. You spent 6 months there undergoing intensive training in advanced naval warfare techniques. Sarah stared at the photos in disbelief. Sir, I think there's been a mistake. 3 years ago, I was working at my father's auto shop in Texas and taking community college classes. I had never even been to Nevada. Your memories of that time were altered for security purposes, the Admiral explained patiently. The technology to safely modify specific memories has been available to the military for several years, though it's used only in the most sensitive operations. You volunteered for the program, Ms. Martinez. In fact, you insisted on it after learning about the project's potential to save American lives. Sarah's head was spinning. Nothing he was saying made sense, yet she couldn't deny the evidence in front of her. The photos were clearly real, and they showed her in environments and situations that felt strangely familiar, despite her conscious lack of memory. The program was called Operation Viper Ghost, Admiral Harrison continued. We were developing a new generation of naval warfare specialists, individuals with enhanced reflexes, intuitive tactical awareness, and the ability to interface directly with advanced weapon systems. The tattoo contains microscopic circuitry that enhances your natural abilities and allows for direct neural connection to compatible military hardware. Sarah looked down at her arm, seeing the tattoo in an entirely new light. What she had assumed was simply ink in her skin was actually some form of advanced technology. The program was suspended 2 years ago due to budget constraints and political considerations, the Admiral explained. All participants had their memories modified and were returned to their normal lives. However, we kept track of their progress, knowing that we might need to reactivate the program someday. And that day is now, Sarah asked, beginning to understand where this conversation was heading. Admiral Harrison nodded grimly. 3 weeks ago, intelligence agencies detected a significant threat to national security. A rogue nation has developed advanced submarine technology that makes their vessels virtually undetectable to conventional sonar. They're planning to use these submarines to launch a coordinated attack on major American naval installations. He pulled out another set of photographs showing sleek, threatening-looking submarines unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Our conventional forces are not equipped to deal with this level of stealth technology. We need someone with the enhanced abilities and training to operate our most advanced defensive systems. And you think I'm that someone? Sarah asked, still struggling to process everything she was learning. I don't think it, Ms. Martinez. I know it. Your performance during basic training has been exceptional, even with your memory suppressed. The abilities you demonstrated are exactly what we need for this mission. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking out at the harbor where the gray warship sat at anchor. Everything in her life suddenly made sense in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. Her inexplicable skills, her dreams, even her decision to join the Navy, all of it had been building toward this moment. What exactly would be required of me? She asked. You would be assigned to the USS Leviathan, our most advanced guided missile cruiser. The ship is equipped with prototype defensive systems that can only be operated by someone with your enhanced capabilities. Your mission would be to protect American naval assets from the submarine threat. And my memories? Would they be restored? Admiral Harrison hesitated. Partially. We would restore your memories of the technical training and operational procedures, but the personal details of your time in the program would remain sealed. It's safer that way, both for you and for national security. Sarah considered this for a long moment. Part of her wanted to demand the return of all her memories, to know exactly what had been taken from her. But another part of her understood the necessity of operational security. If I agree to this, she said finally, what happens to the other recruits? They're expecting me to complete basic training with them. You would officially graduate early with honors and receive immediate assignment to the Leviathan. Your classmates would be told that you were selected for a special advanced training program. It happens occasionally with exceptional recruits. Sarah thought about Jake and his constant harassment. There was a certain irony in the fact that while he had been mocking her as a weak rookie, she was actually being recruited for one of the Navy's most classified and important missions. When would I need to give you an answer? She asked. Now, I'm afraid. The threat is imminent, and we need to move quickly. The Leviathan is scheduled to depart in 48 hours. Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. In her mind, she could hear her grandmother's voice telling her that sometimes life presents opportunities that seem impossible, but are actually destiny calling. Everything in her life had led to this moment, this choice. I'll do it, she said firmly. Admiral Harrison smiled for the first time since they had entered the room. I was hoping you would say that. Welcome back to Operation Viper Ghost, Ms. Martinez. The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. Sarah was quietly removed from the basic training program under the cover story that Admiral Harrison had outlined. Her personal effects were packed, and she was transported to a secure facility for memory restoration and updated briefings. The memory restoration process was unlike anything Sarah could have imagined. She lay on a medical table while technicians attached sensors to her head and activated equipment that looked like something from a science fiction movie. As the process began, images and sensations flooded back into her mind. She remembered the recruitment process 3 years earlier. A mysterious woman had approached her at the community college, somehow knowing details about Sarah's background that should have been private. The woman had spoken about Sarah's potential, about abilities that lay dormant within her. She remembered the facility in Nevada, a sprawling complex hidden in the desert. Months of intensive training with instructors who pushed her beyond what she thought were her physical and mental limits. She remembered other recruits, men and women who had been selected from various branches of the military for their exceptional potential. Most vividly, she remembered the integration process where the tattoo had been applied. It wasn't just ink, but a complex network of biocompatible circuitry that enhanced her nervous system's ability to process information and react to threats. The pain had been incredible, but the results were immediate and dramatic. She remembered training exercises where she could track multiple targets simultaneously while operating weapon systems with her mind rather than her hands. She remembered the feeling of being connected to the ship's systems, of sensing incoming threats as clearly as she could see her own hand. And she remembered the other recruits. There had been 12 of them initially, but the program was so demanding that only 5 had completed the full training. She wondered what had happened to the others, whether they were still out there somewhere with their memories suppressed, living normal lives while carrying the same deadly potential she carried. When the memory restoration was complete, Sarah felt like a different person. The skills and knowledge that had seemed to emerge randomly during basic training now made perfect sense. She wasn't just naturally talented. She was a highly trained operative with capabilities that few people in the world possessed. Her final briefing took place in a secure room aboard the USS Leviathan itself. The ship was a marvel of modern naval engineering, bristling with advanced radar systems, missile launchers, and defensive capabilities that existed nowhere else in the world. Captain Rebecca Walsh, the ship's commanding officer, was a no-nonsense woman in her mid-40s who had been briefed on Sarah's background and capabilities. Unlike the skepticism Sarah had faced from her fellow recruits, Captain Walsh treated her with the respect due a valuable specialist. The enemy submarines we're facing represent a quantum leap in stealth technology, Captain Walsh explained, pointing to technical diagrams displayed on a large monitor. They use a combination of advanced hull materials and active noise cancellation that makes them virtually invisible to conventional sonar. But not to me, Sarah said, understanding beginning to dawn. Exactly. The enhancement process you underwent gives you the ability to detect patterns that conventional sensors miss. You'll be operating our quantum detection array, a system so advanced that it exists only on this ship. Sarah studied the technical specifications of the system she would be operating. It was incredibly complex, requiring the operator to process multiple streams of sensory data simultaneously while maintaining direct neural connection to the ship's defensive systems. How many enemy submarines are we expecting? Sarah asked. Intelligence suggests at least 6, possibly as many as 10. They're planning a coordinated strike on naval installations along the West Coast. If they succeed, it could cripple American naval operations in the Pacific for years. The weight of responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a heavy cloak. The lives of thousands of sailors and civilians potentially rested on her ability to detect and neutralize threats that conventional forces couldn't even see. When do we begin the mission? She asked. We're already underway, Captain Walsh replied. We departed port 2 hours ago. Intelligence indicates the enemy submarines are already in position and will begin their attack within the next 18 hours. Sarah nodded and made her way to the quantum detection array station. The equipment was located in a specially shielded compartment deep within the ship, surrounded by banks of monitors and control systems that hummed with electronic activity. As she approached the main control interface, Sarah felt the tattoo on her arm begin to tingle. The sensation grew stronger as she placed her hand on the neural interface pad. Suddenly, her consciousness expanded beyond her physical body, and she found herself connected to the ship's sensors in a way that defied description. She could feel the ocean around them, sense the movements of fish and whales, detect the thermal layers and underwater currents. It was like having a sixth sense that extended for miles in every direction. But there was something else out there, something that didn't belong. At the very edge of her enhanced perception, Sarah detected a disturbance in the water that was too regular, too controlled to be natural. Captain, she called through the communication system. I'm detecting something approximately 40 nautical miles northwest of our position. It's moving in a pattern that suggests artificial propulsion, but I'm not getting any conventional sonar readings. Captain Walsh's voice came back immediately. Can you get a more precise location? Sarah focused her enhanced senses, feeling the neural connection deepen. The tattoo on her arm was now glowing faintly, visible even through her uniform sleeve. Information flowed through her mind faster than conscious thought could process, but somehow she understood it all. Contact confirmed, she reported. Single submarine, heading southeast at approximately 20 knots. Hull configuration suggests advanced stealth technology. This has to be one of them. Outstanding work. Can you track its movement and predict its intended target? Sarah closed her eyes and allowed the enhanced sensory data to wash over her. In her mind, she could see the submarine's path as clearly as if she were watching a map display. She calculated its speed, direction, and probable destinations based on known naval installations in the area. Based on current heading and speed, the target appears to be Naval Base San Diego, she reported. Estimated time to attack position is 14 hours. Copy that. We're adjusting course to intercept. Keep monitoring the contact, and let me know if you detect any additional submarines in the area. Over the next several hours, Sarah's enhanced abilities allowed her to track not just one submarine, but 3 separate contacts moving in a coordinated pattern. The enemy was conducting a sophisticated multi-pronged attack, with submarines positioned to strike multiple targets simultaneously. As night fell, Sarah remained at her station, her consciousness extended into the ocean around them. The neural interface allowed her to operate for extended periods without the fatigue that would normally accompany such intense concentration. The tattoo on her arm continued to glow softly, a visible sign of the alien technology coursing through her system. It was during the early morning hours that Sarah detected something that made her blood run cold. A fourth submarine, larger than the others, was moving into position directly ahead of the Leviathan. Unlike the others, this one seemed to be actively hunting, as if it knew the American ship was in the area. "Captain," Sarah called urgently, "we have a problem. There's a large submarine approximately 10 miles ahead of us, and I think it knows we're here." "How is that possible? We're running silent, and our stealth systems should make us invisible to their sensors." Sarah studied the data flowing through her enhanced senses. Something about the enemy submarine's behavior suggested capabilities beyond what they had been briefed to expect. "I think they may have their own enhanced detection systems," she reported. "This submarine is moving like it's tracking us specifically." Before Captain Walsh could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. The enemy submarine had fired torpedoes, and they were heading directly for the Leviathan. "All hands, battle stations." Captain Walsh's voice boomed over the ship's communication system. "This is not a drill." Sarah felt the ship's defensive systems come online, and suddenly, she was connected not just to the detection array, but to the entire weapons grid. Information flowed through her mind at incredible speed as she tracked the incoming torpedoes and calculated intercept solutions. Torpedo 1, bearing 045, range decreasing rapidly, she reported, her hands moving across control interfaces faster than humanly possible. Engaging countermeasures. The Leviathan's defensive systems responded to Sarah's neural commands, launching countermeasures and evasive actions with precision that no human crew could have achieved. Torpedoes that should have been certain hits were deflected or destroyed, and the ship maneuvered through the water like a living creature avoiding a predator. But the enemy submarine wasn't finished. As soon as its first attack failed, it began launching more torpedoes while maneuvering to avoid the Leviathan's return fire. Sarah found herself fighting a deadly game of chess played out in 3 dimensions beneath the ocean's surface. Every move had to be calculated instantly. Every decision carried life or death consequences. The enhanced abilities that had seemed like a gift during training now felt like the only thing standing between her ship and disaster. "Multiple contacts," she called out as her sensors detected additional submarines converging on their position. "We're surrounded." The battle that followed would later be classified at levels so high that most naval officers would never learn the details. Sarah's enhanced abilities allowed her to coordinate the ship's defenses against multiple simultaneous attacks while tracking and engaging enemy targets with deadly precision. But as the fight continued, Sarah began to realize that this was more than just a test of her abilities. The enemy had somehow learned about the Viper Ghost program and had developed countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize enhanced operatives. The real test was just beginning. The USS Leviathan shuddered under the impact of near-miss explosions as enemy torpedoes detonated close enough to rattle every piece of equipment aboard. Sarah remained locked in neural connection with the ship's systems. Her enhanced consciousness spread throughout the vessel's defensive grid like a spider sensing vibrations in its web. Through her expanded awareness, she could track 5 enemy submarines now, all moving in coordinated attack patterns that suggested a level of tactical sophistication far beyond what intelligence had predicted. But it was the 6th contact that worried her most, a massive submarine that remained at the edge of her detection range, seemingly observing the battle rather than participating. "Contact Sierra 6 is maintaining position at maximum detection range," Sarah reported to Captain Walsh. "It's not engaging, just watching." "Probably their command vessel," the captain replied grimly. "They're studying our capabilities, learning how we fight." Sarah realized with growing alarm that this entire engagement might be a test. The enemy wasn't just trying to sink the Leviathan. They were gathering intelligence on the Viper Ghost program and its capabilities. A new wave of torpedoes streaked toward them from 3 different directions. Sarah's hands moved across the control interfaces in patterns that seemed like a deadly dance, her enhanced reflexes allowing her to process and respond to multiple threats simultaneously. The ship's point defense systems responded to her neural commands, sending interceptor missiles to destroy incoming torpedoes while maneuvering the massive vessel with impossible agility. But Sarah could feel something else happening, something that sent a chill down her spine. The neural interface was drawing heavily on her body's resources, and the extended battle was beginning to take its toll. The tattoo on her arm was now glowing so brightly that it was visible even through her uniform, and she could feel heat radiating from the embedded circuitry. "Captain, I'm experiencing some kind of feedback from the neural interface," she reported, trying to keep the concern out of her voice. "Can you maintain the connection?" Captain Walsh asked. Sarah gritted her teeth as another wave of pain shot through her arm. "Yes, ma'am. For now." The truth was more complicated. During her restored memories of the training program, Sarah could recall warnings about extended use of the neural interface. The human nervous system wasn't designed to handle the kind of information processing required for direct ship-to-mind connection. Most operatives could maintain the connection for an hour or two before needing rest. Sarah had been connected for nearly 6 hours of continuous combat. A new alarm sounded as one of the enemy submarines launched what appeared to be a different type of weapon. Instead of a conventional torpedo, the projectile moved erratically through the water, changing direction and speed in patterns that defied physics. "What the hell is that?" Captain Walsh demanded. Sarah focused her enhanced senses on the strange weapon, and what she discovered made her blood run cold. "It's some kind of smart torpedo," she reported. "It's not following a ballistic path. It's actively tracking us and adapting to our evasive maneuvers." The weapon demonstrated capabilities that seemed almost alive, learning from each defensive action the Leviathan took and adjusting its approach accordingly. Sarah realized that conventional countermeasures would be useless against such an adaptive weapon. Instead, she did something that wasn't in any training manual. She reached out with her enhanced consciousness and attempted to interfere with the torpedo's guidance systems directly. The neural interface wasn't designed for offensive electronic warfare, but Sarah's desperate creativity found a way to make it work. The smart torpedo suddenly veered off course and exploded harmlessly against the ocean floor. But the effort required to achieve that result sent feedback through the neural interface that felt like being struck by lightning. Sarah cried out in pain as the tattoo on her arm flared so brightly that it illuminated the entire control room. "Martinez, are you all right?" Captain Walsh's voice seemed to come from very far away. I'm okay," Sarah gasped, though she was anything but okay. The neural interface was beginning to overload, and she could feel her enhanced abilities starting to falter. Worse, she realized that her desperate gambit had revealed the full extent of her capabilities to the watching enemy command submarine. Sure enough, the enemy vessels immediately changed their tactics. Instead of conventional attacks, they began deploying more of the smart weapons, obviously trying to force Sarah to use her most advanced abilities until the neural interface burned out completely. "They're trying to disable me," Sarah realized. "They know about the limitations of the neural interface." Captain Walsh understood immediately. "Can you break the connection and switch to conventional systems?" "Not without losing our defensive advantage," Sarah replied. "Without the neural interface, we can't track their stealth submarines or coordinate our responses fast enough. We'd be sitting ducks." It was a trap worthy of a master tactician. The enemy had forced Sarah into a position where she had to choose between burning out her enhanced abilities or watching her ship be destroyed by weapons she couldn't detect with conventional sensors. But Sarah had learned something during her weeks in basic training, something that no amount of high-tech enhancement could replace: the value of creative thinking and stubborn determination. If the enemy wanted to play a game of technological one-upmanship, she would change the rules entirely. "Captain, I need you to trust me," she said. "I'm going to try something that's not in any manual." "Do it." Instead of trying to maintain the neural connection at maximum capacity, Sarah began to pulse her consciousness in and out of the ship's systems. Rather than staying constantly connected, she would link up just long enough to gather information and coordinate responses, then disconnect to let her nervous system recover. The technique required perfect timing and incredible mental discipline. She had to predict when threats would appear and connect to the systems just in time to respond, all while managing the feedback from the neural interface and coordinating the ship's complex defensive grid. To the enemy submarines, it would look like the Leviathan's defensive capabilities were fluctuating randomly. Sometimes their attacks would be perfectly countered, other times they would nearly succeed. It was like fighting an opponent who was incredibly skilled but unpredictably inconsistent. The psychological effect on the enemy crews was exactly what Sarah had hoped for. Uncertainty crept into their tactics as they tried to figure out what was happening to their supposedly superior weapons. Attack patterns became more cautious, giving Sarah precious moments to rest between engagements. But the enemy command submarine wasn't fooled. As Sarah monitored its position at the edge of her detection range, she realized it was moving closer, apparently deciding to join the battle directly. When the command submarine finally revealed itself, Sarah understood why it had remained hidden. The vessel was enormous, easily twice the size of the largest submarine in the American fleet. More importantly, it was bristling with weapons that she had never seen before, including what appeared to be some kind of directed energy system. "Captain, the command submarine is moving to attack position," Sarah reported. "And it's carrying weapons that I don't recognize. Can you identify them?" Sarah focused her enhanced senses on the approaching vessel, trying to analyze its weapon systems. What she discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The enemy had developed their own version of neural interface technology, but instead of enhancing human operators, they had created an artificial intelligence that could directly control their weapons. "They've got an AI controlling their systems," she reported. "It's like fighting another enhanced operative, except it doesn't have the limitations of human biology." The implications were staggering. While Sarah had to carefully manage the strain on her nervous system, the enemy AI could operate at maximum capacity indefinitely. It could process information faster than any human and coordinate attacks with precision that no biological operator could match. The command submarine's first attack confirmed Sarah's worst fears. Multiple weapons launched simultaneously from different angles, each following complex attack patterns that adapted in real time to the Leviathan's defensive responses. It was like facing a chess grandmaster who could think dozens of moves ahead while playing multiple games at once. Sarah realized that she was outmatched in terms of raw processing power and endurance. But she had something the enemy AI didn't: intuition, creativity, and the ability to make illogical decisions that couldn't be predicted by any algorithm. Instead of trying to match the AI's computational abilities, Sarah began to fight like a human. She made decisions that seemed tactically unsound, maneuvered the ship in patterns that violated basic military doctrine, and used weapons in ways they weren't designed for. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The enemy AI, programmed to respond to logical tactical decisions, couldn't predict or counter Sarah's deliberately irrational responses. Weapons that should have been certain hits missed by impossible margins. Attack patterns that were mathematically perfect were defeated by maneuvers that made no strategic sense. "What are you doing out there?" Captain Walsh asked as the Leviathan performed a maneuver that should have been impossible for a ship of its size. "Fighting crazy," Sarah replied, grinning despite the pain from the neural interface. Sometimes the best strategy is no strategy at all. But the enemy AI was learning, adapting to Sarah's unpredictable tactics with frightening speed. Each exchange became more dangerous as the artificial intelligence incorporated Sarah's unconventional responses into its tactical calculations. Sarah realized that she was in a race against time. The AI would eventually learn to predict even her most irrational decisions. But her human nervous system was rapidly approaching its limits. The neural interface was beginning to cause physical damage, and she could feel her enhanced abilities starting to degrade. It was then that she remembered something from her restored memories of the training program. There had been one technique that the instructors had warned them never to use except in the most desperate circumstances. They called it a neural surge, deliberately overloading the interface to achieve a brief period of exponentially enhanced capability. The technique was incredibly dangerous. Most operatives who attempted it suffered permanent neurological damage. Some didn't survive at all. But it would give Sarah the processing power to match the enemy AI for a few critical minutes. "Captain, I need you to move us to attack position on the command submarine," Sarah said. "Are you sure?" That thing outguns us by a significant margin. Trust me, I've got one shot at ending this, but I need to get close. The Leviathan began moving toward the enemy command submarine, using Sarah's enhanced detection abilities to avoid the smaller attack submarines that were still prowling the area. As they approached, the enemy AI seemed to recognize the threat and began concentrating its attacks on the American ship. Sarah took a deep breath and initiated the neural surge. Pain exploded through her body as the interface drew power far beyond its safe operating limits. But along with the pain came an incredible expansion of her consciousness. Suddenly, she could perceive every detail of the battle with crystal clarity, process dozens of data streams simultaneously, and predict the enemy's movements with uncanny accuracy. The tattoo on her arm was now glowing so brightly that it was painful to look at directly. Sarah could feel the embedded circuitry heating up dangerously, but she pushed the discomfort aside and focused on the task at hand. With her exponentially enhanced abilities, Sarah began to systematically dismantle the enemy AI's tactical advantages. She anticipated every attack, countered every strategy, and turned the enemy's own weapons against each other. The battle became a deadly dance of move and countermove, with Sarah's enhanced intuition matching the AI's computational power. But she knew she couldn't maintain this level of enhancement for long. Already she could feel her nervous system beginning to rebel against the overload. She had minutes at most before the neural surge would either burn out the interface entirely or cause permanent damage to her brain. Sarah made her choice. Instead of trying to destroy all the enemy submarines, she focused everything on the command vessel. If she could eliminate the AI controlling the enemy fleet, the remaining submarines would lose their coordinated advantage. The final attack was a masterpiece of enhanced tactical thinking. Sarah used the Leviathan's weapons in combinations that shouldn't have been possible, creating overlapping fields of fire that gave the enemy AI no escape routes. The massive command submarine, for all its advanced technology and artificial intelligence, couldn't adapt fast enough to Sarah's lightning-fast tactical changes. The enemy vessel's destruction was spectacular, its advanced weapons systems exploding in a chain reaction that lit up the ocean for miles around. The remaining enemy submarines, suddenly, deprived of their AI coordinator, scattered in confusion and eventually withdrew from the battle area. But, as the last enemy contact disappeared from the sensors, Sarah collapsed at her station. The neural surge had achieved its purpose, but at a tremendous cost. The interface was completely burned out, and she could feel that her enhanced abilities were gone, possibly forever. Captain Walsh rushed to her side as medical personnel arrived to assist. "Martinez, can you hear me?" Sarah managed to nod weakly. "Mission accomplished, Captain. The threat has been neutralized." As the medical team worked to stabilize her condition, Sarah reflected on what she had learned during the battle. The enemy had been testing more than just the Viper Ghost program. They had been probing the entire concept of human-machine integration in warfare. The fact that they had developed their own AI-controlled system suggested that this would not be the last such conflict. But, for now, the immediate threat had been defeated. American naval installations were safe, and the enemy had learned that technology alone wasn't enough to overcome the unpredictable creativity of the human spirit. As the Leviathan turned toward home, Sarah knew that her life had changed forever. The neural interface might be destroyed, but the experience had taught her that her true strength hadn't come from the technology in her arm. It had come from her determination, her creativity, and her refusal to give up even when facing impossible odds. Back at the base where she had started as a mocked rookie, Sarah's story would become legend. But the full truth would remain classified, known only to a select few who understood the price of defending freedom in an increasingly dangerous world. 3 weeks after the battle with the enemy submarines, Sarah found herself in a military hospital in San Diego, staring at the ceiling tiles she had memorized during her long recovery. The doctors had done everything they could to repair the neurological damage caused by the neural surge, but the prognosis remained uncertain. The enhanced abilities that had made her a formidable operative were gone, and it was unclear whether they would ever return. The tattoo on her arm had changed dramatically. Where once it had been a vibrant, detailed viper with eyes that seemed almost alive, now it was faded and scarred. The embedded circuitry had burned out completely, leaving behind only ordinary ink and scar tissue. To most observers, it looked like an old tattoo that had been poorly maintained. Admiral Harrison visited her regularly, bringing updates on the investigation into the enemy submarine technology and the aftermath of the battle. The intelligence gathered from the wreckage of the command submarine had revealed disturbing information about the scope of the threat they had faced. The enemy AI was more sophisticated than we initially realized, he explained during one of his visits. Our tech teams have determined that it was capable of learning and adapting at rates that exceeded our most advanced computer systems. If you hadn't found a way to defeat it, the consequences could have been catastrophic. Sarah nodded, though she still struggled with the aftermath of her decision to use the neural surge. Any word on whether there are more submarines out there with similar capabilities? Intelligence suggests this was a test deployment, a way for them to gather data on our defensive capabilities. The good news is that your unconventional tactics seem to have confused their data collection efforts. They learned much less than they hoped to. The Admiral paused and studied Sarah's face carefully. The question now is what happens next. The medical team believes your neurological systems are stabilizing, but the enhancement technology is completely burned out. We could attempt to reintegrate new circuitry, but the risks would be enormous. Sarah had been thinking about this possibility for weeks. The idea of undergoing the enhancement process again was both tempting and terrifying. The abilities had been incredible, but the price she had paid was almost too high to contemplate. What about the other Viper Ghost operatives? She asked. Are their memories being restored as well? Admiral Harrison's expression grew somber. That's part of what I came to discuss with you. We've located 4 of the other 5 operatives from your training group. 3 of them have agreed to have their memories restored and return to active duty. The 4th. He paused. The 4th was killed in a car accident 6 months ago. We believe it may not have been accidental. The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. If the enemy knew about the Viper Ghost program, they might be systematically hunting down former operatives. Her battle with the AI submarine might have made her a specific target. What about the 5th operative? She asked. We haven't been able to locate him. Marcus Chin disappeared from his cover identity 3 months ago. We're not sure if he's dead, captured, or if his memories returned naturally, and he's gone into hiding. Sarah remembered Marcus from her restored memories. He had been the most naturally gifted of all the trainees, with an intuitive understanding of the enhancement technology that surpassed even the instructor's expectations. If he was still alive and his abilities were intact, he could be either a valuable asset or a dangerous enemy, depending on his current circumstances. Admiral, I need to ask you something, Sarah said, making a decision that had been building in her mind for days. What if I chose not to undergo re-enhancement? What if I wanted to return to regular naval service? Admiral Harrison raised his eyebrows in surprise. You want to give up the program entirely? I want to have a choice about my life, Sarah replied firmly. For 3 years, I've been living with suppressed memories, enhanced against my will, and manipulated into situations I didn't fully understand. I want to make decisions about my own future. The Admiral nodded slowly, understanding evident in his expression. You've certainly earned the right to make that choice. But I hope you'll consider the bigger picture. The threat we faced wasn't isolated. Intelligence suggests that multiple hostile nations are developing similar technologies. We need people like you, people who can think creatively and adapt to threats that conventional forces can't handle. I understand the importance of the mission, Sarah said. But I also understand the importance of being able to choose my own path. Before Admiral Harrison could respond, there was a knock on Sarah's hospital room door. A nurse entered, followed by a familiar face that made Sarah's heart race with unexpected emotion. It was Jake Morrison, her tormentor from basic training. But the arrogant, mocking expression she remembered was gone, replaced by something that looked like genuine concern and respect. I hope it's okay that I came, Jake said awkwardly. I heard you were injured during whatever mission you were really on. Admiral Harrison excused himself with a knowing smile, leaving Sarah alone with the man who had made her life miserable during those first weeks in the Navy. How did you even know I was here? Sarah asked. Word gets around, Jake replied, taking a seat in the visitor's chair. Look, Sarah, I owe you an apology. A big one. I was a complete ass to you during training, and I've been thinking about it ever since you disappeared. Sarah studied his face, looking for signs of the same hostility she remembered. But Jake seemed genuinely remorseful, and there was a maturity in his expression that hadn't been there before. "Why?" she asked simply. Jake sighed and ran his hands through his hair. "Honestly, I was intimidated by you. You were better than me at everything, and instead of trying to learn from you or improve myself, I lashed out. It was childish and stupid, and I'm sorry." The apology was unexpected and, Sarah realized, surprisingly meaningful. Jake's harassment had been a constant source of stress during those early weeks, and hearing him acknowledge his behavior provided a sense of closure she hadn't known she needed. "What happened after I left?" she asked. "We finished basic training, but it wasn't the same without you there. A lot of people started questioning my version of what happened during that navigation exercise. Tommy finally told everyone what really happened, and, well, let's just say I wasn't very popular for a while." Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about leadership and what it really means. I thought being in charge meant being the biggest and loudest person in the room. But watching you during training, even before I knew what you were really capable of, I realized that real leadership is about competence, integrity, and putting the mission above your own ego." Sarah was touched by the sincerity in his voice. The Jake Morrison sitting in her hospital room was clearly a different person than the one who had mocked her during those first weeks of training. "Where are you stationed now?" she asked. "Norfolk, Virginia. I'm on the USS Constitution. It's good duty, and I'm learning a lot. My commanding officer is exactly the kind of leader I should have been trying to emulate instead of tearing down people who were better than me." They talked for another hour, and Sarah found herself genuinely enjoying the conversation. Jake was still confident and outgoing, but his arrogance had been replaced by a genuine desire to be a better sailor and a better person. After Jake left, Sarah spent the rest of the day thinking about leadership, choices, and the kind of person she wanted to be. The enhanced abilities had given her incredible power, but they had also taken away her autonomy in many ways. Now, for the first time in years, she had the opportunity to choose her own path. The next morning brought another visitor, one that surprised Sarah even more than Jake's appearance. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the woman who had originally recruited her for the Viper Ghost program, entered her room with a complex expression of pride, concern, and something that might have been guilt. "Hello, Sarah," Dr. Rodriguez said softly. "I imagine you have questions for me." "More than a few," Sarah replied, "starting with why you recruited me in the first place." Dr. Rodriguez took a seat and opened a tablet, displaying what appeared to be psychological profiles and test results. "You were identified through a comprehensive screening process that analyzed thousands of potential candidates. We were looking for individuals with specific neurological characteristics that would make them compatible with the enhancement technology." She swiped to a new screen showing brain scans and genetic profiles. "But beyond the technical compatibility, we were looking for something else. The ability to think creatively under pressure, to make intuitive leaps that defy logical analysis, and to maintain moral clarity even in the most challenging circumstances. And you found all that in a community college student working at her father's auto shop." "We found potential," Dr. Rodriguez corrected. "Potential that has been more than fulfilled. Your performance during the submarine battle exceeded every projection our models had generated. You didn't just operate the technology, you transcended it." Sarah considered this for a moment. "If I was so promising, why suppress my memories at all? Why not give me a choice about participating?" Dr. Rodriguez's expression grew troubled. "That was a decision made by people much higher in the chain of command than me. The theory was that operatives would perform better if they weren't constantly second-guessing their enhancement or worrying about the risks involved. And what do you think now?" "I think we were wrong," Dr. Rodriguez said without hesitation. "Your performance suggests that conscious choice and full awareness of the stakes actually improve an operative's effectiveness. You fought harder and more creatively precisely because you understood what you were risking." The conversation was interrupted by Admiral Harrison's return, this time accompanied by a man Sarah didn't recognize. The newcomer wore a Navy uniform with insignia indicating high rank, but Sarah couldn't place his specific position. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet Admiral James Patterson, Chief of Naval Operations," Admiral Harrison said. He's here to discuss the future of the Viper Ghost program. Admiral Patterson was a stern-looking man in his early 60s with gray hair and intense blue eyes. He studied Sarah with the same analytical gaze she had seen from Admiral Harrison, but there was something else in his expression: respect. "Ms. Martinez," Admiral Patterson said, extending his hand. "I've read the reports of your actions during the submarine incident. Your country owes you a debt of gratitude that can never be fully repaid." "Thank you, sir," Sarah replied. "I was just doing my job." "Actually, you were doing much more than that," Admiral Patterson continued. "You were improvising solutions to problems that our best military minds hadn't anticipated. Your decision to fight crazy, as Captain Walsh described it, has already influenced our thinking about AI threats and unconventional warfare." Admiral Patterson pulled up a chair and sat down, indicating that this was going to be a longer conversation than Sarah had expected. "The reason I'm here," he continued, "is to offer you a choice. We can re-enhance you and return you to active Viper Ghost operations. We can assign you to conventional naval service. Or," he paused dramatically, "we can offer you something entirely new." "What kind of something new?" Sarah asked. "We want you to help us redesign the entire program," Admiral Patterson explained. "Your insights about the limitations and potential of human-machine integration are invaluable. We're proposing to create a new position, Director of Enhanced Warfare Development. You would be responsible for training the next generation of enhanced operatives and developing strategies to counter AI-based threats." The offer was extraordinary. Instead of being a subject of the program, Sarah would become its architect. She would have the authority to ensure that future operatives had the choices and understanding that she had been denied. "Would I be enhanced again for this position?" she asked. "That would be entirely up to you," Admiral Patterson replied. "The position would require deep understanding of the technology and its capabilities, but it wouldn't necessarily require you to undergo the enhancement process again." Sarah felt a surge of excitement at the possibilities the position offered. She could help develop a program that respected the autonomy and dignity of its participants while still providing the military with the capabilities needed to defend against emerging threats. But she also felt a responsibility to the other former operatives who might be in danger. What about Marcus Chun and the others? If someone is targeting former Viper Ghost operatives, shouldn't protecting them be a priority? "Finding and protecting the former operatives is actually part of the position I'm offering you," Admiral Patterson said. "You would have the resources to locate Marcus and ensure the safety of the others. You understand their capabilities and psychology better than anyone." Sarah realized that this was exactly the kind of opportunity her grandmother had taught her to recognize, a chance to turn a difficult experience into something that could help others. Instead of being a victim of circumstances beyond her control, she could become an agent of positive change. "I accept," she said without hesitation. Admiral Patterson smiled for the first time since entering the room. "Outstanding. When you're medically cleared, you'll be transferred to a new facility in Colorado where you'll begin your work immediately." Over the next several days, as Sarah prepared for her new role, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. She had started as a rookie who was mocked and underestimated by her peers. She had discovered abilities within herself that she never knew existed. She had faced impossible odds and found a way to triumph through creativity and determination. Most importantly, she had learned that true strength didn't come from technology or enhancement. It came from the ability to make difficult choices, to adapt to changing circumstances, and to never give up on what you believed in. The tattoo on her arm might be faded and scarred, but Sarah Martinez had discovered something more valuable than any enhancement. She had discovered who she really was. On her last day at the hospital, Jake Morrison visited one final time. This time, he brought with him several other recruits from their basic training class, all of whom had heard rumors about Sarah's mysterious disappearance and wanted to pay their respects. "We never got to properly congratulate you on your early graduation," Tommy said, speaking for the group. "Whatever you did during your special assignment, word is that it was pretty impressive." Sarah smiled, knowing that she would never be able to tell them the full truth about what had happened. But she could see in their faces the same respect and admiration that she had always hoped to earn through her service. "Thank you," she said simply. "It means more than you know." As her former classmates filed out of the room, Jake lingered behind. "Sarah, I wanted you to know that you changed me," he said seriously. "Watching you handle everything I threw at you with grace and dignity taught me what real strength looks like. I'm a better sailor and a better person because of your example." After Jake left, Sarah sat alone in her room, looking out at the harbor where gray ships moved like shadows against the setting sun. Somewhere out there, new threats were developing, new challenges were emerging that would require the same kind of creative thinking and stubborn determination that had carried her through the submarine battle. But Sarah was ready for whatever came next. She had learned that being underestimated could be an advantage, that technology was only as powerful as the person wielding it, and that sometimes the most important battles were fought not with weapons, but with the courage to make difficult choices. The rookie who had been mocked for her size and questioned for her abilities was gone. In her place stood a warrior who understood that true strength came not from what others believed about you, but from what you believed about yourself. Admiral Harrison arrived to escort her to her new assignment, and as they walked through the corridors of the hospital, Sarah felt a sense of completion. Her journey from ridiculed rookie to enhanced operative to program director had taught her that life rarely unfolds according to plan, but that didn't mean you couldn't choose how to respond to the unexpected. The Viper tattoo on her arm might be faded, but the spirit it represented was stronger than ever. Sarah Martinez had found her calling, and she was ready to help others find theirs. As their car pulled away from the hospital and headed toward the airport, Sarah caught a glimpse of the training facility where her journey had begun. New recruits were arriving, probably facing the same doubts and challenges she had experienced. Some of them might be dealing with harassment and discrimination, wondering if they had what it took to succeed. Sarah made a silent promise that when she had the authority to do so, she would make sure that future recruits were judged by their capabilities and character, not by their appearance or background. The military needed all the talent it could get, and that meant creating an environment where everyone had the opportunity to reach their full potential. The plane that carried her to Colorado was small and unremarkable, just another military transport carrying personnel to their next assignment. But for Sarah, it represented something much more significant. It was carrying her toward a future where she would have the power to shape the program that had shaped her. As the aircraft climbed into the sky, Sarah closed her eyes and allowed herself to feel a sense of pride in what she had accomplished. She had started as someone others looked down on and had become someone they looked up to. She had faced impossible odds and had found a way to win through ingenuity and determination. But most importantly, she had learned that the greatest victories weren't won through superior technology or enhanced abilities. They were won through the simple refusal to give up, the willingness to adapt and learn, and the courage to stand up for what was right. The ghost was fading from her arm, but the Viper's spirit lived on in her heart. Sarah Martinez was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that she had already proven herself in the most demanding crucible imaginable. Her story had begun with mockery and doubt, but it would continue with respect and purpose. The rookie had become a leader, and the leader was ready to change the world.